bow of the Bolero with him when they went to Nova Scotia on vacation one year. Johnny, 8 years old, laughing and excited by the screw-like motion of the boat, helping him with his homework, helping him with his treehouse, helping him get the hang of his silver compass when he had been in the Scouts. All the memories were jumbled together in no chronological order at all. Johnny was the single unifying thread. Johnny eagerly discovering the world that had maimed him so badly in the end. And now he wished Johnny would die. Oh, how he wished it, that he would die, that his heart would stop beating, that the final low traces on the EEG would go flat, that he would just flicker out like a guttering candle in a pool of wax, that he would die and release them. The seller of lightning rods arrived at Kathy's Roadhouse in Somersworth, New Hampshire, in the early afternoon of a blazing summer's day, less than a week after the 4th of July in that year of 1973. And somewhere not so far away, there were, perhaps, storms only waiting to be born in the warm elevator shafts of summer's thermal updrafts. He was a man with a big thirst, and he stopped at Kathy's to slake it with a couple of beers, not to make a sale. But from force of long habit, he glanced up at the roof of the low ranch-style building, and the unbroken line he saw standing against the blistering gunmetal sky caused him to reach back in for the scuffled suede bag that was his sample case. Inside, Kathy's was dark and cool and silent, except for the muted rumble of the color TV on the wall. A few regulars were there, and behind the bar was the owner, keeping an eye on As the World Turns, along with his patrons. The seller of lightning rods lowered himself onto a bar stool and put his sample case on the stool to his left. The owner came over. "Hi, friend. What'll it be?" "A bud," the lightning rod salesman said, "and draw another for yourself if you're of a mind." "I'm always of a mind," the owner said. He returned with 2 beers, took the salesman's dollar, and left 3 dimes on the bar. "Bruce Carrick," he said, and offered his hand. The seller of lightning rods shook it. "Dahi is the name," he said. "Andrew Dahi." He drained off half his beer. "Pleased to meet you," Carrick said. He wandered off to serve a young woman with a hard face another tequila sunrise, and eventually wandered back to Dahi. "From out of town?" "I am," Dahi admitted. "Salesman." He glanced around. "Is it always this quiet?" "No, it jumps on the weekends, and I do a fair trade through the week. Private parties is where we make our dough, if we make it. I ain't starving, but neither am I driving a Cadillac." He pointed a pistol finger at Dahi's glass. "Freshen that?" "And another for yourself, Mr. Carrick." "Bruce," he laughed. "You must want to sell me something." When Carrick returned with the beers, the seller of lightning rods said, "I came in to lay the dust, not sell anything. But now that you mention it..." He hauled his sample case up onto the bar with a practiced jerk. Things jingled inside it. "Oh, here it comes," Carrick said and laughed. 2 of the afternoon regulars, an old fellow with a wart on his right eyelid, and a younger man in grey fatigues, wandered over to see what Dahi was selling. The hard-faced woman went on watching As the World Turns. Dahi took out 3 rods, a long one with a brass ball at the tip, a shorter one, and one with porcelain conductors. "What the hell?" Carrick said. "Lightning rods," the old campaigner said and cackled. "He wants to save this gin mill from God's wrath, Brucey. You better listen to what he says." He laughed again. The man in the grey fatigues joined him. Carrick's face darkened, and the lightning rod salesman knew that whatever chance he had had of making a sale had just flown away. He was a good salesman, good enough to recognize that this queer combination of personalities and circumstances sometimes got together and queered any chance of a deal even before he had a chance to swing into his pitch. He took it philosophically and went into his spiel anyway, mostly from force of habit. "As I was getting out of my car, I just happened to notice that this fine establishment wasn't equipped with lightning conductors. and that it's constructed of wood. Now, for a very small price and easy credit terms if you should want them, I can guarantee that lightning will strike this place at 4 this afternoon, the man in the gray fatigue said with a grin. The old campaigner cackled. Mister, no offense, Carrick said, but you see that... He pointed to a golden nail on a small wooden plaque beside the TV near the glistening array of bottles. Spiked on the nail was a drift of papers. All of those things are bills. They got to be paid by the 15th of the month. They get written in red ink. Now you see how many people are in here drinking right now? I got to be careful. I got to... Just my point, Dahi broke in smoothly. You have to be careful. And the purchase of 3 or 4 lightning rods is a careful purchase. You've got a going concern here. You wouldn't want it wiped out by one stroke of lightning on a summer's day, would you? He wouldn't mind, the old campaigner said. He'd just collect the insurance and go down to Florida, wouldn't you, Brucey? Carrick looked at the old man with distaste. Well then, let's talk about insurance, the lightning rod salesman interposed. The man in the gray fatigues had lost interest and had wandered away. Your fire insurance premiums will go down? The insurance is all lumped together, Carrick said flatly. Look, I just can't afford the outlay. Sorry. Now, if you was to talk to me again next year... Well, perhaps I will, the lightning rod salesman said, giving up. Perhaps I will. No one thought they could be struck by lightning until they were struck. It was a constant fact of this business. You couldn't make a fellow like this Carrick see that it was the cheapest form of fire insurance he could buy. But Dahi was a philosopher. After all, he had told the truth when he said he came in to lay the dust. To prove it, and to prove there were no hard feelings, he ordered another beer. But this time he did not match it with one for Carrick. The old campaigner slid onto the stool beside him. About 10 years ago, there was a fella got hit by lightning out on the golf course, he said. Killed him just as dead as shit. Now, there's a man could have used a lightning rod right up on his head, am I right? He cackled, sending out a lot of stale beer breath into Dahi's face. Dahi smiled dutifully. All the coins in his pockets were fused together. That's what I heard. Lightning's a funny thing. Sure is. Now, I remember one time... A funny thing, Dahi thought, letting the old man's words flow harmlessly over him, nodding in the right places out of instinct. A funny thing, all right, because it doesn't care who or what it hits, or when. He finished his beer and went out, carrying his satchel full of insurance against the wrath of God, maybe the only kind ever invented, with him. The heat struck him like a hammer blow. But still he paused for a moment in the mostly deserted parking lot, looking up at the unbroken line of roof ridge. $19.95, $29.95 tops, and the man couldn't afford the outlay. He'd saved $70 on his combined insurance the first year, but he couldn't afford the outlay. And you couldn't tell him different with those clowns standing around yucking it up. Maybe someday he would be sorry. The seller of lightning rods got into his Buick, cranked up the air conditioning, and drove away west toward Concord and Berlin, his sample case on the seat beside him, running ahead of whatever storms might be whistling up the wind behind. In early 1974, Walt Hazlitt passed his bar exams. He and Sarah threw a party for all of his friends, her friends, and their mutual friends, more than 40 people in all. The beer flowed like water, and after it was over, Walt said they could count themselves damn lucky not to have been evicted. When the last of the guests were seen out, at 3 a.m, Walt had come back from the door to find Sarah in the bedroom, naked except for her shoes and the diamond clip earrings he had gone into hock to give her for her birthday. They had made love not once but twice before falling into sodden slumber from which they awoke at nearly noon with paralyzing hangovers. About 6 weeks later, Sarah discovered that she was pregnant. Neither of them ever doubted that conception had occurred on the night of the big party. In Washington, Richard Nixon was being pressed slowly into a corner, wrapped in a snarl of magnetic tapes. In Georgia, a peanut farmer, ex-Navy man and current governor named James Earl Carter, had begun talking with a number of close friends about running for the job Mr. Nixon would soon be vacating. In room 619 of the Eastern Maine Medical Center, Johnny Smith still slept. He had begun to pull into a fetal shape. Dr. Strauns, the doctor who had talked to Herb and Vera and Sarah in the conference room on the day following the accident, had died of burns in late 1973. His house had caught fire on the day after Christmas. The Bangor Fire Department had determined that the fire had been caused by a faulty set of Christmas tree ornaments. Two new doctors, Weizsack and Brown, interested themselves in Johnny's case. 4 days before Nixon resigned, Herb Smith fell into the foundation of a house he was building in Gray, landed on a wheelbarrow, and broke his leg. The bone was a long time healing, and it never really felt good again. He limped, and on wet days he began to use a cane. Vera prayed for him, and insisted that he wrap a cloth that had been personally blessed by the Reverend Freddie Coltsmore of Bessemer, Alabama, around the leg each night when he went to bed. The price of the blessed Coltsmore cloth, as Herb called it, was $35. It did no good that he was aware of. In the middle of October, shortly after Gerald Ford had pardoned the ex-president, Vera became sure that the world was going to end again. Herb realized what she was about barely in time. She had made arrangements to give what little cash and savings they had recouped since Johnny's accident to the Last Time Society of America. She had tried to put the house up for sale, and had made an arrangement with the Goodwill, which was going to send a van out in 2 days' time to pick up all the furniture. Herb found out when the realtor called him to ask if a prospective buyer could come and look at the house that afternoon. For the first time, he had genuinely lost his temper with Vera. "What in Christ's name did you think you were doing?" he roared after dragging the last of the incredible story out of her. They were in the living room. He had just finished calling Goodwill to tell them to forget the van. Outside, rain fell in monotonous gray sheets. "Don't blaspheme the name of the Savior, Herbert. Don't—" "Shut up! Shut up! I am tired of listening to you rave about that crap!" She drew in a startled gasp. He limped over to her, his cane thumping the floor in counterpoint. She flinched back a little in her chair, and then looked up at him with that sweet martyr's expression that made him want God forgive him to bust her one across the head with his own damn walking stick. "You're not so far gone that you don't know what you're doing," he said. "You don't have that excuse. You snuck around behind my back, Vera. You—" "I did not. That's a lie. I did no such—" "You did," he bellowed. "Well, you listen to me, Vera. This is where I'm drawing the line. You pray all you want. Praying's free. Write all the letters you want. A stamp still only costs 13 cents. If you want to take a bath in all the cheap, shitty lies those Jesus jumpers tell, if you want to go on with the delusions and the make-believe, you go on. But I'm not a part of it. Remember that. Do you understand me? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Do you understand me? You think I'm crazy?" she shouted at him, and her face crumpled and squeezed together in a terrible way. She burst into the braying, ugly tears of utter defeat and disillusion. "No," he said more quietly, "not yet. But maybe it's time for a little plain talk, Vera. And the truth is, I think you will be if you don't pull out of this and start facing reality." "You'll see," she said through her tears. "You'll see. God knows the truth, but waits." "Just as long as you understand that he's not going to have our furniture while he's waiting," Herb said grimly. "As long as we see eye to eye on that." "It's last times," she told him. "The hour of the apocalypse is at hand." "Yeah? That and 15 cents will buy you a cup of coffee, Vera." Outside, the rain fell in steady sheets. That was the year Herb turned 52, Vera 51, and Sarah Hazlitt 27. Johnny had been in his coma for 4 years. The baby came on a Halloween night. Sarah's labor lasted 9 hours. She was given mild whiffs of gas when she needed them, and at some point in her extremity, it occurred to her that she was in the same hospital as Johnny, and she called his name over and over again. Afterwards, she barely remembered this, and certainly never told Walt. She thought she might have dreamed it. The baby was a boy. They named him Dennis Edward Hazlitt. He and his mother went home 3 days later, and Sarah was teaching again after the Thanksgiving holiday. Walt had landed what looked like a fine job with a Bangor firm of lawyers, and if all went well, they planned for Sarah to quit teaching in June of 1975. She wasn't all that sure she wanted to. She had grown to like it. On the first day of 1975, 2 small boys, Charlie Norton and Norm Lawson, both of Otisfield, Maine, were in the Nortons' backyard having a snowball fight. Charlie was 8, Norm was 9. The day was overcast and drippy. Sensing the end of the snowball fight was nearing, it was almost time for lunch, Norm charged Charlie, throwing a barrage of snowballs. Ducking and laughing, Charlie was at first forced back, and then turned tail and ran, jumping the low stone wall that divided the Norton backyard from the woods. He ran down the path that led toward Strimmer's Brook. As he went, Norm caught him a damn good one on the back of the hood. Then Charlie disappeared from sight. Norm jumped the wall and stood there for a moment, looking into the snowy woods and listening to the drip of meltwater from the birches, pines, and spruces.
"Come on back, chicken!"
Norm called, and made a series of high, gobbling sounds. Charlie didn't rise to the bait. There was no sign of him now, but the path descended steeply as it went down toward the brook. Norm gobbled again and shifted irresolutely from one foot to the other. These were Charlie's woods, not his. Charlie's territory. Norm loved a good snowball fight when he was winning, but he didn't really want to go down there if Charlie was lying in ambush for him with 6 good hard slush balls all ready to go. Nonetheless, he had taken 6 steps down the path when a high, breathless scream rose from below. Norm Lawson went as cold as the snow his green gum rubber boots were planted in. The 2 snowballs he had been holding dropped from his hands and plopped to the ground. The scream rose again, so thin it was barely audible. Jeepers creepers, he went and fell in the brook, Norm thought, and that broke the paralysis of his fear. He ran down the path, slipping and sliding, falling right on his can once. His heartbeat roared in his ears. Part of his mind saw him fishing Charlie from the brook just before he went down for the 3rd time and getting written up in Boy's life as a hero. 3/4 of the way down the slope, the path dog-legged, and when he got round the corner, he saw that Charlie Norton hadn't fallen in Strimmer's Brook after all. He was standing at the place where the path leveled out, and he was staring at something in the melting snow. His hood had fallen back, and his face was nearly as white as the snow itself. As Norm approached, he uttered that horrible, gasping, out-of-breath scream again.
"What is it?"
Norm asked, approaching.
"Charlie, what's wrong?"
Charlie turned to him, his eyes huge, his mouth gaping. He tried to speak, but nothing came out of his mouth but 2 inarticulate grunts and a silver cord of saliva. He pointed ahead. Norm came closer and looked. Suddenly, all the strength went out of his legs, and he sat down hard. The world swam around him. Protruding from the melting snow were 2 legs clad in blue jeans. There was a loafer on one foot, but the other was bare, white, and defenseless. One arm stuck out of the snow, and the hand at the end of it seemed to plead for a rescue that had never come. The rest of the body was still mercifully hidden. Charlie and Norm had discovered the body of 17-year-old Carol Dunbarger, the 4th victim of the Castle Rock Strangler. It had been almost 2 years since he had last killed, and the people of Castle Rock, Strimmer's Brook formed the southern borderline between the towns of Castle Rock and Otisfield, had begun to relax, thinking the nightmare was finally over. It wasn't. Chapter 6. 11 days after the discovery of the Dumbarger girl's body, a sleet and ice storm struck northern New England. On the 6th floor of the Eastern Maine Medical Center, everything was running just a little bit late in consequence. A lot of the staff had run into problems getting to work, and those that made it found themselves running hard just to stay even. It was after 9 a.m. when one of the aides, a young woman named Alison Conover, brought Mr. Starrett his light breakfast. Mr. Starrett was recovering from a heart attack and was doing his 16 in intensive care. A 16-day stay following a coronary was standard operating procedure. Mr. Starrett was doing nicely. He was in room 619, and he had told his wife privately that the biggest incentive to his recovery was the prospect of getting away from the living corpse in the room's second bed. The steady whisper of the poor guy's respirator made it hard to sleep, he told her. After a while, it got so you didn't know if you wanted it to go on whispering or stop. Stop dead, so to speak. The TV was on when Allison came in. Mr. Starrett was sitting up in bed with his control button in one hand. Today had ended, and Mr. Starrett had not yet decided to blank out My Backyard, the cartoon show that followed it. That would have left him alone with the sound of Johnny's respirator. "I'd about given up on you this morning," Mr. Starrett said, looking at his breakfast tray of orange juice, plain yogurt, and wheat flakes with no great joy. What he really craved was 2 cholesterol-filled eggs, fried over easy in sweating butter, with 5 slices of bacon on the side, not too crisp. The sort of fare that had, in fact, landed him here in the first place, at least according to his doctor, the bird brain. "The going's bad outside," Allison said shortly. 6 patients had already told her they had about given up on her this morning, and the line was getting old. Allison was a pleasant girl, but this morning she was feeling harried. "Oh, sorry," Mr. Starrett said humbly. "Pretty slippery on the roads, is it?" "It sure is," Allison said, thawing slightly. "If I didn't have my husband's 4-wheel drive today, I never would have made it." Mr. Starrett pushed the button that raised his bed so he could eat his breakfast comfortably. The electric motor that raised and lowered it was small but loud. The TV was also quite loud. Mr. Starrett was a little deaf, and as he had told his wife, the guy in the other bed had never complained about a little extra volume. Never asked to see what was on the other channels either. He supposed a joke like that was in pretty poor taste. But when you'd had a heart attack and wound up in intensive care sharing a room with a human vegetable, you either learned a little black humor or you went crazy. Allison raised her voice a little to be heard over the whining motor and the TV as she finished setting up Mr. Starrett's tray. "There were cars off the road all up and down State Street Hill." In the other bed, Johnny Smith said softly, "The whole wad on 19. One way or the other. My girl's sick." "You know this yogurt isn't half bad," Mr. Starrett said. He hated yogurt, but he didn't want to be left alone until absolutely necessary. When he was alone, he kept taking his own pulse. "It tastes a little bit like wild hickory and—" "Did you hear something?" Allison asked. She looked around doubtfully. Mr. Starrett let go of the control button on the side of the bed, and the whine of the electric motor died. On the TV, Elmer Fudd took a pot shot at Bugs Bunny and missed. "Nothing but the TV," Mr. Starrett said. "What'd I miss?" "Nothing, I guess. It must have been the wind around that window." She could feel a stress headache coming on. Too much to do, and not enough people this morning to help her do it. And she rubbed at her temples as if to drive the pain away before it could get properly seated. On her way out, she paused and looked down at the man in the other bed for a moment. Did he look different somehow? As if he had shifted position? Surely not. Allison left the room and went on down the hall, pushing her breakfast cabinet ahead of her. It was as terrible a morning as she had feared it would be, everything out of kilter, and by noon her head was pounding. She had quite understandably forgotten all about anything she might have heard that morning in room 619. But in the days that followed, she found herself looking more and more often at Smith, and by March Allison had become almost sure that he had straightened a bit. come out of what the doctors called his pre-fetal position a little. Not much, just a little. She thought of mentioning it to someone, but in the end did not. After all, she was only an aide, little more than kitchen help. It really wasn't her place. It was a dream, he guessed. He was in a dark, gloomy place, a hallway of some kind. The ceiling was too high to see. It was lost in the shadows. The walls were dark, chromed steel. They opened out as they went upward. He was alone, but a voice floated up to where he stood, as if from a great distance. A voice he knew, words that had been spoken to him in another place, at another time. The voice frightened him. It was groaning and lost, echoing back and forth between that dark chromed steel like a trapped bird he remembered from his childhood. The bird had flown into his father's tool shed and hadn't the wit to get back out. It had panicked and had gone swooping back and forth, cheeping in desperate alarm, battering itself against the walls until it had battered itself to death. This voice had the same doomed quality as that long-ago bird's cheeping. It was never going to escape this place. "You plan all your life and you do what you can," this spectral voice groaned. "You never want nothing but the best, and this kid comes home with hair down to his asshole and says the President of the United States is a pig. A pig! Shit! I don't—" "Look out," he wanted to say. He wanted to warn the voice, but he was mute. Look out for what? He didn't know. He didn't even know for sure who he was, although he had a suspicion that he had once been a teacher or a preacher. "Jesus!" the faraway voice screamed. Lost voice, doomed, drowned. "Gee!" Silence then. Echoes dying away. Then, in a little while, it would start again. So after a while, he did not know how long, time seemed to have no meaning or relevance in this place. He began to grope his way down the hall, calling in return, or perhaps only calling in his mind, perhaps hoping that he and the owner of the voice could find their way out together, perhaps only hoping to give some comfort and receive some in return. But the voice kept getting further and further away, dimmer and fainter, far and wee, until it was just an echo of an echo. And then it was gone. He was alone now, walking down this gloomy and deserted hall of shadows, and it began to seem to him that it wasn't an illusion or a mirage or a dream, at least not of the ordinary kind. It was as if he had entered limbo, a weird conduit between the land of the living and that of the dead. But toward which end was he moving? Things began to come back, disturbing things. They were like ghosts that joined him on his walk, fell in on either side of him, in front of him, behind him, until they circled him in an eldritch ring. Weave a circle round him thrice, and touch his eyes with holy dread. Was that how it went? He could almost see them, all the whispering voices of purgatory. There was a wheel turning and turning in the night, a wheel of the future, red and black, life and death, slowing. Where had he laid his bet? He couldn't remember, and he should be able to, because the stakes were his existence. In or out, it had to be one or the other. His girl was sick. He had to get her home. After a while, the hallway began to seem brighter. At first he thought it was imagination, a sort of dream within a dream, if that were possible. But after an unknown length of time, the brightness became too marked to be an illusion. The whole experience of the corridor seemed to become less dreamlike. The walls drew back until he could barely see them, and the dull, dark color changed to a sad and misty gray, the color of twilight on a warm and overcast March afternoon. It began to seem that he was not in a hallway at all anymore, but in a room, almost in a room, separated from it by the thinnest of membranes, a sort of placental sac, like a baby waiting to be born. Now he heard other voices, not echoey but dull and thudding, like the voices of nameless gods speaking in forgotten tongues. These voices came clearer, until he could nearly make out what they were saying. He began to open his eyes from time to time, or thought he did, and he could actually see the owners of those voices, bright, glowing, spectral shapes with no faces at first, sometimes moving about the room, sometimes bending over him. It didn't occur to him to try speaking to them, at least not at first. It came to him that this might be some sort of afterlife, and these bright shapes the shapes of angels. The faces, like the voices, began to come clearer with time. He saw his mother once, leaning into his field of vision and slowly thundering something totally without meaning into his upturned face. His father was there another time. Dave Pelson from school. A nurse he came to know. He believed her name was Mary, or possibly Marie. Faces, voices, coming closer, gelling together. Something else crept in. A feeling that he had changed. He didn't like the feeling. He distrusted it. It seemed to him that whatever the change was, it was nothing good. It seemed to him that it meant sorrow and bad times. He had gone into the darkness with everything, and now it felt to him that he was coming out of it with nothing at all, except for some secret strangeness. The dream was ending. Whatever it had been, the dream was ending. The room was very real now, very close. The voices, the faces. He was going to come into the room. And it suddenly seemed to him that what he wanted to do was turn and run, to go back down that dark hallway forever. The dark hallway was not good, but it was better than this new feeling of sadness and impending loss. He turned and looked behind him, and yes, it was there, the place where the room's walls changed to dark chrome, a corner beside one of the chairs where, unnoticed by the bright people who came and went, the room became a passageway into what he now suspected was eternity. The place where the other voice had gone, the voice of the cab driver. Yes, that memory was all there now. The cab ride, the driver bemoaning his son's long hair, bemoaning the fact that his son thought Nixon was a pig. Then the headlights breasting the hill, a pair on each side of the white line. The crash. No pain, but the knowledge that his thighs had connected with the taximeter hard enough to rip it out of its frame. There had been a sensation of cold wetness, and then the dark hallway, and now this. Choose, something inside whispered. Choose, or they'll choose for you. They'll rip you out of this place, whatever and wherever it is, like doctors ripping a baby out of its mother's womb by cesarean section. And then Sarah's face came to him. She had to be out there someplace, although hers had not been one of the bright faces bending over his. She had to be out there, worried and scared. She was almost his now. He felt that. He was going to ask her to marry him. That feeling of unease came back, stronger than ever.